There's this really great animated movie centered on a band of plucky woodland creatures who discover their forest homes and food supplies are under threat from human urban expansion, and respond by banding together, infiltrating the human world and resisting. A child-friendly, often comedic surface layer coexists with a thoughtful focus on environmental destruction and a sober recognition of capitalism's grim power. I am, of course, talking about the 1994 Studio Ghibli film Pom Poko, written and directed by Isao Takahata, which follows the resistance efforts of a group of shape-shifting raccoon dogs, or tanuki, against Tokyo's 20th century urban expansion, and the construction of the so-called Tama New Town. You probably thought I was talking about Over the Hedge, given the title of this video, the fact that I was showing Over the Hedge footage, and the fact that my last video was a long-form analysis of Over the Hedge, but yeah, don't you look silly now. For real though, on that last upload I got more than a few comments saying I should look at these films together, that'd make for a cool video. So let's look at Pom Poko. Let's look at Pom Poko through Over the Hedge. Let's look at Over the Hedge through Pom Poko. Let's look at how and why their parallel premises diverge, and what that divergence can tell us. But you know, first, since this one is a request, how about you do me a solid and listen to me tell you about today's sponsor, Aura. Because it's sort of an important time to be talking about Aura. Hackers may have recently stolen the social security numbers of every American. Over 2.9 billion records were stolen from national public data, records which include a person's full name, address, date of birth, social security number, and so on. Reportedly, a large chunk of that information's been released for free online. Luckily, I'm not American. We don't have social security numbers in Britain, just, you know, rampant transphobia and jellied eels for some reason, but if I were one of you Yanks right now, I'd probably be taking every precaution I could to secure my data. That's where Aura comes in. It's an all-in-one online security service that'll provide you with identity theft insurance, a VPN, an automated scam call/text screener, an antivirus, a whole bunch of other features, but also, key here, Aura will send you fast alerts if they find your data leaked online, and it even lets you automate removal requests to data brokers so you can get some of it taken down. You can go to my link, aura.com/pillarofgarbage, to try 14 days of Aura for free, and now's probably the best time to try it out. Let's be honest, national public data is not going to do anything about that leak, but that 2-week trial will be long enough for Aura to find out which, if any, of your data got leaked. So yeah, maybe check it out. But hey, that's enough of that. What's the deal with Pom Poko? What's it about? Well, if there is some quality that runs through all of Pom Poko, unites the film, I would say it's an indeterminacy, a resistance to straightforward, stable classification. Maybe the most important way Pom Poko embraces this sense of betweenness comes in the line the film draws between the worlds of the Tanuki and of the humans, or rather the line it doesn't draw. Near the film's start, as the audience is introduced to the Tanuki's shape-shifting abilities, we're shown they prize the restorative powers of the humans' then new energy drinks. That most characteristic, tradition-steeped Tanuki activity is sustained, boosted even, by the fruits of human modernity. It goes beyond this, of course. The Tanuki eat scavenged hamburgers in their war council. They watch TV, when by themselves they take on an anthropomorphized form, clad in Japanese dress. One charming exchange sees sort of protagonist Chokichi persuade the bellicose Gonta and his more militant supporters to let a few of the humans stay in Tama, the way it used to be, so the Tanuki can continue eating their food. Even after the construction of Tama New Town is well underway, as destruction looms, the halcyon days the Tanuki look back to are not free of humans, just free of human dominance. This nestling in between the natural-human binary prefigures some recent ideas in eco-criticism to do with questioning that distinction, and allows the world of Pom Poko to fully flesh out and truly imagine the sort of ecological synthesis Over the Hedge only gestures toward. And perhaps the greatest symbol for Pom Poko's sense of flux, the film's in-betweenness, is simply the Tanuki itself. Michael Dillon Foster writes the following in an article for the journal Asian Ethnology. The Tanuki is a wild animal that occasionally makes mischievous forays into areas inhabited by humans. It is a beast of the borders, ecologically skirting the line between culture and nature. Folklorically too, Tanuki are commonly depicted as liminal creatures. And this boundary-defying, indeterminate Tanuki nature is expressed by the non-committal, flip-flopping resolve of that central character, Chaokichi, one moment supporting Gonta's militarism, the next urging restraint. He floats throughout the picture under the sway of whichever characters or ideas he sees the merit in at that moment. Ultimately, it's this, Chaokichi's ability to keep a loose grip, to almost shrug off the past, that ends up preserving its legacy, burying a win of sorts within the loss. Accepting change is what ensures continuity, if not success. And that's kind of the best we get here. That isn't really the case with Over the Hedge. It nearly wraps up on a downer note. The animals beat the humans, but only for now, and doing so's eaten into their crucial food gathering time, before Hammy the squirrel finds the nuts he'd lost at the film's start. It's true that the film gives us reason earlier on to question how far this victory will reach, more on that in my last video, but it's also true that emotionally, this Deus Ex Machina is played straight. At the very least, it's the idea of a happy ending, the suggestion that the Hibernators have won. As I set out in that other video, I think there are some interesting conclusions to be reached from going with the film here, from tentatively accepting that suggestion, but surely there's also something worth noting about the surprise of Nuts Ex Machina, the way the plot point comes crashing back into the story, unforeshadowed, with its implications left undwelled upon. You can almost sense a desperation in Over the Hedge for an ending tidier, more optimistic than the story's natural resting point, which sees the battered and bruised animals unsure of their odds for the future. For this film, that ambiguity is a terrifying concept, one that needs to be tidied away via flimsy plot device, made subtextual, reduced to loose implication. There's a gap here between bombastic victory and clear defeat that Over the Hedge doesn't seem to trust its viewers or its characters to negotiate. That space is where Pom Poko lives. The film opens, happens, and closes between these points, with the Tanuki threatened with their land slipping away, but not extinct, not even really vanquished. That isn't to say nothing happens, a lot does, choices are made, lines are drawn and crossed and redrawn, we witness a fundamental changing of the Tanuki's culture and environment, but in retrospect, the trajectory of measured decline Granny Oroku identifies at the movie's open is never really threatened, despite our protagonists' best efforts, and despite the little victories they manage to achieve within it. Where Over the Hedge shies away from this ambiguity, shields its eyes from the dark clouds on the edge of its vision, Pom Poko draws its curious, poignant power from precisely that unresolving. We can see this quite clearly in the film's highlight moments, the two mass illusion scenes. The first comes around 2/3 through the film. Aided by the elders visiting masters of illusion from Shikoku, the Tanuki pool their powers to create a ghost parade through Tama Newtown. It's a spellbinding, extended sequence, lasting so long that it might have overstayed its welcome were it not for the dynamic and varied visuals. We see a vast array of folkloric forms, richly colored, each with their own sense of physicality and motion. It's as arresting a vision for the viewer as it is for the town's shocked inhabitants. But there is a keen irony here. Critic Todd Andrew Borlick finds the film concerned with, quote, the displacement of Japan's traditional folklore by the entertainment empires of global capital, and he's far from alone in that assessment. The Tanuki and their losing battle in Pom Poko have been read by many as representing the fading strength of Japanese old culture in the face of globalization and modernity. For Slant magazine writer Chris Cabin, the Tanuki are ultimately symbols of the importance of folklore, and Stuart Warren writes for Sequat magazine, the struggles of the Tanuki represent the forceful confrontation between Western society/economics and Eastern traditionalism. Like a steamroller embodied literally in the form of construction equipment that the raccoon dogs sabotage, Westernization sweeps over Japan, crushing ancestral traditions and places critical to Japanese cultural identity. This parade, named Operation Spectre in the English subs, is the Tanuki's masterstroke, a laboriously vivid resurrection of all the spirits and ghost stories and things that go bump in the night that Japan's growing urban population is forgetting, is a phantasmic love letter to that culture being displaced, but it's also a failure. It doesn't work, it was never going to work. A local theme park takes credit for the procession, pretends it's a viral stunt. The town's inhabitants stay put. That failure marks the pivot point of the film's plot, the moment that Tanuki's resistance goes from active to reactive, and the moment the writing on the wall becomes impossible to miss, even to them. So, if the Tanuki do stand in for that Japanese traditionalism, Operation Spectre embodies both the care, knowledge, love its authors, Tanuki and Ghibli alike, have for that culture, and its irrevocable downfall. Joy and sadness, victory and loss are hard to separate here. It's not altogether dissimilar in the other mass illusion sequence. After the failure of the Ghost Parade has taken one elder's life directly, taken another's in a more roundabout way, and led the third to all but negotiate terms of surrender, half of the remaining Tanuki charge in for one last bout of doomed violence, while the others decide to once again pool their transformative powers, prove to the world that humanity aren't the only ones that can change the face of the land. It's a last-ditch effort not to stop the humans, but to bring back what was lost. It's temporary, of course, the transformation only lasts for a few minutes. But what minutes those are. Tama Hills is plunged decades into the past, diggers, apartments, and inhabitants alike swept away. The idyllic world of Tanuki human harmony we'd barely glimpsed at the movie's start is unfurled, pored over, drawn and animated in lavish, ekphrastic detail. A farmyard cow's tail twitching lazily in the heat. Walkers pausing to offer prayer at a Shinto shrine. Birds wheeling in gentle circles above the valley's greenery. Every frame in a Studio Ghibli movie is detailed, is a work of art, but these moments are almost incomparable, a feast for the eyes. This is Pom Poko's best moment. Pathos gushes forth. We feel this tremendous sense of loss, of absence, and once again, the on-screen humans meet us here. But this moment isn't just the film's most memorable, it's also the one that crystallizes Pom Poko into the thing it is, the thing it always was. Their lives, their culture, these aren't over, but now the fight is. And now the historical documentary style of the narration interspersed throughout the film makes sense. The film was always an elegy for the pre-urban Tama Hills Tanuki, was always an act of memory, was always this grand illusion sequence scaled up right from the start. This is the movie in miniature, and this defining point, this emotional peak, this highest high, is the Tanuki accepting that physically at least, this past is gone, that there is no unchanging the world. Warren writes in his article that the bittersweet ending is a key Studio Ghibli characteristic, says Pom Poko exemplifies this with what he calls its torn conclusion. How very unlike Over the Hedge. Indeed, it is perhaps strange that two films, starting off from such similar premises, would pursue such different directions, that compared to Over the Hedge, Pom Poko tends away from clear victory, from clear anything, toward proclaiming the inexorability of modernity and of capital, and toward a search for some minor compromise beneath all that. Doubtless, a lot of folks would simply chalk that up to complexity, argue Pom Poko's a smarter film and Over the Hedge a dumber one, level 1 DreamWorks versus level 100 Studio Ghibli, that kind of thing, but I don't think that's the full story. Watership Down, the 1972 novel by British writer Richard Adams, tells the story of a colony of rabbits who narrowly escape the destruction of their ancestral warren by housing developers, find their way to a new home, and fight to preserve it. It's a third text starting from this general premise then, rural animal life placed under threat by human urban expansion, but it is a text whose differences are quickly apparent. One is the relative originality and depth of this animal society. Granted, we see less of this in the film and TV adaptations than was present in the book, but across interpretations, Watership Down folds in elements like rabbit mythology and even snatches of an original Lapine language. Adam's rabbits inhabit a world more their own than either Over the Hedge's Hibernators or Pom Poko's Tanuki. Another way Watership Down goes beyond the other texts we've been discussing is the violence. In Over the Hedge, violence is never visceral. The few moments of violence we see hold off from showing injury, and more often than not, violence is either off-screen, a threat, an implication, or made slapstick. Pom Poko certainly is a more violent piece. There are various sequences showing Gonta's Tanuki killing humans, either through trickery or more direct methods of attack, but Death or even injury is rarely brought on screen, in frame, and again, when that rule is broken, it tends to be for comedic purposes. By contrast, Watership Down arguably traumatized an entire generation. That's not even my claim, I'm quoting the Independent's Ed Power, but he is right. I read the book as a kid, and I still remember coming across that first shockingly bloody moment where Bigwig, the Rabbit Squad's arrogant yet brave heavy, gets his throat torn up in a snare, nears death, but in doing so, reveals the invisible danger of their resting place to the rest of the Rabbit Party. It's the moment from the 1978 film that springs to mind every time I think of the movie. It managed to lodge itself deep enough within my little kid brain that years later, upon learning I'd unknowingly eaten rabbit for the first time, I remember bawling my eyes out. It's not the only time Bigwig comes close to dying for the group either. In the battle at the story's climax, he persuades the rest to leave him, buried as they fall back, in a desperate Hail Mary to catch the enemy combatants off guard. Despite this darkness, or perhaps because of it, Watership Down remains a classic in the field of children's literature, at least in Britain, and so, naturally, a great many readers have scrutinized the text, attempting to peek beneath the surface of the story, peer beyond the general themes of ecological restraint, and uncover new depths of meaning. During his life, Adams was repeatedly asked what he'd meant the story to say, whether the highly controlled Warren of Ephrafa was intended to stand in for this totalitarian society or that, whether the bloody battle fought over it was some sort of political parable, or whether its murderous, dictatorial head, General Woundwort, should be read as a critique of Stalin, and so on. Rubbish, Adams apparently always replied. It's just a story about rabbits. And that is true, but it also isn't. Like a great many British men of his generation, Richard Adams served in the Second World War. Sources seem to indicate he was lucky enough to avoid direct combat against Axis forces, but his division was involved with Operation Market Garden, part of the Allied advance into the occupied Netherlands in 1944, and Adams would admit in his autobiography that his experiences during this chapter of the war bled over into Watership Down. The story's hero Hazel was based on his commanding officer, Major John Gifford, and Bigwig took his persona from another of Adams' comrades, Captain Paddy Kavanagh, who, per Lincolnshire World, was a courageous fighter who died holding off enemy fire while his platoon escaped. Perhaps there is no conscious allegory or political myth at work behind Watership Down then. Perhaps it is just a story about rabbits, but it's still a story about rabbits that took the shape it did due in part to specific historical factors. What does a hero look like? Can you tell a story like this without the darkness, the violence? How do you rebuild after the world comes crashing down? Is victory too much to hope for? Questions like these are going to look a certain way to a man who'd seen both war and its aftermath firsthand. Isao Takahata was born in late 1935. He was 9 in the final year of the Second World War, as the Allied bombing of Japan reached its final fevered intensity. In the words of Alex Dudok DeWitt in a book extract published by Little White Lies magazine, by the war's end on 15th of August, almost all cities of appreciable size lay in ruins. It was against this backdrop that Takahata would see what he'd later call the worst experience of his life, getting separated alongside his injured sister from their family in the aftermath of a brutal bombing run on the city of Okayama. For days. People have written about the impact of wartime childhood experience like Takahata's on the work of Studio Ghibli before. On that front, I highly recommend this video by friend of the channel Daniel Goldhorn on Akiyuki no Saga and Grave of the Fireflies, but too often, Pom Poko is forgotten here. And it probably shouldn't be. Borlick argues that perhaps even more than most Studio Ghibli films, Pom Poko needs to be rooted in the context of post-war Japan, and Warren agrees. Ultimately, Japan westernized and reconciled with the United States, his article recounts, but how Japan coped with their defeat is chronicled elsewhere through covert means of expression in popular culture. Pom Poko is one such product of expression. Even bearing this in mind though, I don't want to go in-depth here, close read sections of the film with this layer in mind now too, mostly because I don't think we need to. Over the Hedge came out in 2006 from a creative team made up primarily of American and Canadian baby boomers. And their fathers, grandfathers even, may have seen action in World War II, like Adams, likely on the winning side. But unlike Adams, and certainly unlike Takahata, those men would have returned to intact countries, many to one at the peak of an unprecedented ascendancy into wealth and superpower status. And look, I don't want to do the GCSE English paper move here, explain away a text wholesale through some broad historical context, but sometimes that kind of context does matter. Because I do think there's something to be said for the idea that the reason other similar ecological battle texts, particularly Pom Poko, aren't more over the hedgy, that the DreamWorks animal resistance film seems so reluctant to acknowledge any precarity in its resolution, any cost paid by its survivors, the qualities its antecedents so eagerly mine for meaning, is that it's a product by, and primarily for, a society that wasn't used to defeat, hadn't had to accept loss, and try to continue. Over the Hedge came out in 2006, the same year that cracks started to deepen in the US-led occupation of Afghanistan, and only a year or so before the failure of the rapid growth housing system seen in the film sent the economy tumbling down, Jenga style. I won't say these, the signs that the American century had passed its peak were impossible to miss, many still ignore them, or the litany of others that followed to this day. But I think it is fair to say that the Bush-era triumphalism, which arguably lurks behind that scene of nuts ex machina, has since lost some of its resonance. At the end of my last video, I talked about the potential power the film's single-minded determination to end happily might hold to today's ecologically minded viewer, and I do still think that's true. We haven't lost yet, and remembering that is essential, but it's also true that we're pretty much past the point of winning either. Success will simply be holding onto as much as we can. The breaking down of the Tanuki's second collective illusion is perhaps the end of Pom Poko's plot, but the film's not quite over. After a time jump, we're shown an epilogue of sorts. The completion of Tama Newtown didn't mark the end of Tanuki life, even if it did, in a sense, end Tanuki society. Many Tanuki go on living in the human world, perpetually in shapeshifter mode. The ever-adaptable Chokichi is one of them. Many of the Tanuki who can't transform survive too, albeit in a different environment. It's not one of certain death, nor is it entirely barren, but it is worse. It isn't theirs. Some Tanuki fled elsewhere, to another corner of the ever-shrinking Honshu wilderness, presumably exacerbating the countryside overcrowding that had led to intra-Tanuki fighting at Pom Poko's opening. But the last thing we see is the humanized Chokichi spotting an old friend, still in animal form, and rushing to follow him, to reminisce, and to transform again. There is no unchanging the world, but maybe something of the old, maybe even enough of the old, can be preserved anyway, with enough effort and with enough joy. Hey, that's been another Pillar of Garbage video, hope you enjoyed it. But since I've had the gall to include clips from a DreamWorks property in this essay, there's a solid chance it'll get demonetized, so if I'm down there in the comments crying about that again, maybe consider throwing me a few yen over on Patreon. You know what, actually? Why not just give me some money regardless? Huge thanks to everyone doing so already. You guys on screen now, and especially Hanan, Daniel Goldhorn, Magath, Something Capitalism Bad, Thomas R, and Weirdy Beardy. Bye.